Alright guys, welcome to a CBECW tutorial. I'm going to be taking you through the pieces of the CBECW paragraph as well as looking at some examples and creating an example. This is going to follow the same stuff that's in your notes, but is also another great reference for you if you don't have your notebook on you. So let's go ahead and get started. I am going to color code the pieces as we go through so that they're easier to see when we look at examples. So the first one we have is the claim. And the claim is the specific sentence explaining what you will talk about in this paragraph. And now the claim is different than your thesis because your thesis is for the whole paper. So you might have 3 or 4 claims that are supporting your thesis. So the claim is that argument you were making, whether that is an argument about a symbol or an argument about something being supernatural or being a metaphor, or that figurative language is being used, or the author is using something to create an effect like tone, but it's telling your reader what it is they're about to be explained about. Okay? That leads to the bridge, and I think sometimes we overthink the bridge. We think about it as a difficult thing. What is it supposed to do? But it's the context for the evidence, the who, the what, the when. This lets us know what is happening in our evidence that's about to come up. We know who's talking, or we know when it's happening in the text, or we sort of know what's going on around it. And the bridge does not even need to be its own sentence. It can actually be connected to our evidence, and we'll talk more about embedded quotes or embedded evidence when we look at examples. So that leads us directly into our evidence. Evidence is the cited quote that helps prove our point. So this is the quote that we have pulled from the text. Anything, it doesn't need to be something that somebody said. It can be any text from whatever we've been reading. And it helps prove our points. We want to make sure that we're not just using a quote that has some of the same words in it or has some of the same ideas. We want it to be as close to what made us think that. So if you're trying to say that something is a symbol, where in the text were you like, I got it, this is the symbol? That's the one you're looking for, not necessarily the one that has the right words or the one that's near that spot. You want the exact quote. And we do want to make sure that it's in MLA format. So this is our quote. Then we do our parentheses, the last name of the author, and the page number. So that would look like, here's our quote again. Let's say Bowen 6. Okay? So that's what we want our quotes to look like. We want to save this part for after. We do not want that to be our bridge because the bridge is supposed to give us context, and telling me it's on line 127 or on page 6 doesn't give me a lot of context for what that quote really means or who or what is saying it. Okay? That takes us to our commentary, which is our second C, and it explains the significance of the quote. So commentary allows for you to figure out, is this quote a metaphor? What exactly is happening? If it's not mentioned directly, you may need to say it, or what it reveals. So if you're saying it reveals something about the character because they say, oh no, that's crazy, what is it that it reveals, right? The reader may not know it from the out of context, out of the text thing, but you're going to explain that in your commentary. It's the significance of the quote. Which takes us to probably our most difficult piece, which is the warrant. And this is where you connect your quote to your argument. In an essay, this is where you're connecting it back to your thesis. So this is where you make sure that you explain how that quote shows whatever you were talking about in that claim and how that leads to your thesis, whatever that thesis may be. So in the Bowen essay that you guys are about to write, if your thesis is that she is taken away by the trauma of war, you need your warrant to make sure that it's talking about how this relates to the trauma of war or how this is causing her to feel the effects of that trauma or how it's trauma in general. So those are the pieces of the CBECW. And, you know, the real thing is, it's not that these need to be in this specific order or that they need to be the only way you can do it, but this does make sure you cover all your bases, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and look at an example. Go ahead and try and put that on there. So I'm gonna color code this with the same colors that we just used. So we're gonna start with looking for our claim. And we want our claim to be the first sentence or so, but sometimes we have to transition before. So in this example, coming from the Some Dreamers of the Golden Dream, Cork Miller was buried in debt. Before the accident, Lucille was ready to divorce him. That's not quite an argument yet, but here we have an argument. Didion chose to foreshadow the situation, including that the time period was during the prickly season of divorce. So here we know that this person is going to talk about the situation of debt and how it is foreshadowing and how Didion is choosing to do that. So we do get the argument. We know they're going to talk about debt, and we know kind of what they're saying about it. So that takes us to the bridge. This is a really long bridge, and I'm not sure this writer needed this long of a bridge, but she does have a bridge where we sort of know what's going on. So this is kind of a very long bridge, and again, you do not need this long of a bridge, but is introducing the fact of like where they're at in their relationship and where they are in general. Which brings us to our quote, where we have the exact numbers of that debt. Notice the citation, last name of the author, and page number. Now the commentary on this is very, very short. It's actually just one sentence, but it's a sentence that explains the significance of this quote. So we have all these numbers and this debt. We don't need to explain that it's debt, right? It talks about it right there. But what this writer does do is talk about why that's important. So she talks about the dream that Lucille had and how it was to be a prestigious woman, which would have required them to go into debt. Okay, I'm going to flip this around and make sure you guys can see the top here, which leads us to our warrant. And I can't find my purple pen, so I'm going to use pink while I look for that purple pen. But here's the warrant. So this is coming back to their thesis, and their thesis, let me read it for you. According to Didion, Lucille Miller is convicted by the jury because of her unsupporting characteristics. So the way that the jury, Didion saw, personal financial situation. So they brought it back to this debt that they have incurred has made the jury dislike her. That makes her seem like she's a bad person and makes her seem like she could, in fact, murder her husband. Okay? Let's look at another one. Let's look at the one on this page. So again, we'll start with claim. Again, we have sort of a transition. Here's kind of we have essentially everything that Cork was not. Again, something that Lucille wanted to achieve. That's sort of our claim. We're going to talk about Arthwell Hayton. We're going to talk about what the affair got her. And then kind of how it might actually be seen. So here we have kind of a transition into our evidence. Oh, wrong color. Our evidence. Again, the citation. And we have an explanation. And then again, still can't find that purple marker, so we're going to go with pink again. And then again, we're talking about the jury. So again, we've started to come back to our original thesis of why is it that the jury and Didion see this. So we have that piece, and then we also have Didion choosing to include these details. So we're coming back to how does Didion show this to us and brings us back to their original point. Okay, so 2 examples. Now I do want to give you guys an example that we come up with together on this video of something for our Bowen project. So the first thing is we have to have a thesis. If we don't have a thesis, we're not sure what we're writing about. So remember that the prompt is who or what takes Mrs. Drover away at the end. I am going to say that the guilt of war, you guys see that? Yeah, the guilt of war is what takes her away. Okay, that's my thesis. So whatever I write in this paragraph, whatever my claim is, I need to come back to that idea. So I'm going to start with my claim. I'm just going to go straight into it. I'm going to talk about Mrs. Drover So there's my claim, and so throughout we're going to talk about a symbol, and we're going to talk about the symbol, the civilians who supported the war. Now notice that doesn't say anything about guilt, so I'm going to have to make sure in my warrant I talk about how this is causing guilt. Okay? So I am going to have my bridge. This is going to be an embedded quote. When Kathleen is spending time with the soldier, and that's it. That's all I need for my bridge. I've introduced the who, Kathleen, and the when, spending time with the soldier. So now I can go into my evidence. So I'm actually going to use a quote of something that she thought. So to do that, I'm going to put my parentheses, and then because it is quoted in the text, I'm going to add one more of what shall I do? What shall I do? He has gone. And then I'm going to cite this. This is Bowen and on page 8. And I just realized that my sentence doesn't quite make sense yet. So when Kathleen is spending time with the soldier, so I'm going to add in she thinks, and then this is what she is thinking. So that takes us to our commentary. Now I have to explain this quote. Right now it doesn't make a lot of sense. What shall I do? What shall I do? He is gone. So I might say something like this quote indicates Kathleen's attitude Okay, so there's my commentary, and I'm explaining, let me zoom out a little. I'm explaining my thought process here. I'm going to explain her attitude and how it kind of shows she is like sort of blasé of like, oh no, my soldier. And that it sort of shows that she doesn't really see war as a bad thing. So now comes the time. I have not at all come back to this idea of guilt. So this is where it really becomes important that we do the warrant. However, give me a sec to switch pages here. All right, and now we've come back to that idea of guilt. I could probably write more about kind of what that guilt shows, but I want to show you guys the whole paragraph together. So I'm going to actually move this. We're going to move this over to somewhere where we can see the whole paragraph at once. Here we go. And so we see that we're talking about symbolism. Yeah, we talk about how all civilians, what it represents. So we definitely come back to our claim. And we talk about guilt. So that is coming back to our thesis overall. All right. If you have any other questions about CBECW, remember that there is always an example up in the room, and that I am available most days after school to help. All right. Have a great day.